It all started the night I met her. Her name was Isabel. She had this energy about her, like she was always on the verge of something important, but she never quite let anyone in. I didn't think much of it at first. She was just another person I met at the bar, one of those faces that fades into the crowd, a fleeting connection. But there was something about her that made it hard to look away. I still remember the way she smiled. It was like she knew something I didn't. A secret. And for some reason, I felt drawn to uncover it. We talked. We laughed. For a while, it was just two strangers passing the time. Then, out of nowhere, she leaned in and whispered something that made my heart stop. "I can see you." You know. I froze, thinking I misheard her. "What?" She smiled again, the same knowing smile. "I see the way you look at me. But it's not just you, you know. I see everyone. Their thoughts, their desires, their secrets." I laughed, trying to brush it off as a weird pickup line. Yeah, okay. But she wasn't kidding. The way she looked at me, like she could peel away every layer of who I was and see me for exactly what I was. No mask, no distractions, made my skin prickle with unease. I thought I'd never see her again. People like Isabel don't just stick around. They're like passing shadows, here one moment and gone the next. But that wasn't the case. The next day, she sent me a text. "I know what you're hiding. Come find me." I didn't know how to react. Part of me wanted to laugh it off and block the number. But something held me back. That feeling from the night before, the eerie sensation that she wasn't lying, that she really could see things I didn't even realize I was hiding. So I did what any curious person would do. I went. I didn't expect to find anything when I arrived at the address she'd sent me. It was a small, unassuming apartment in the city, tucked away in a corner I didn't even know existed. No signs of life. No cars parked outside. Nothing but silence. I knocked. The door opened slightly, and there she was. "Come in," she said, her voice low, almost as if she were inviting me into a secret world I hadn't known existed. I hesitated for a moment, but then stepped inside. The apartment was sparse. Empty walls. Only a few pieces of old furniture scattered around. It looked like she hadn't been there long. But the air was heavy, almost thick. Isabel stood by the window, staring out into the night. She didn't even look at me as I walked in. "You're wondering why I brought you here, aren't you?" she asked, her voice still calm, still knowing. I nodded. "I told you I can see people," she said. "But I can also see things that haven't happened yet. Futures, choices, paths." I took a step closer, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "And what does that have to do with me?" She turned to face me. Her eyes were dark, almost like there was something behind them, something otherworldly hiding just beneath the surface. "You're not who you think you are," she said softly. "And you're about to find out why." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My head spun, and I almost laughed, thinking she was messing with me. But her face didn't crack. It stayed serious, almost solemn. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could, the sound of a car pulling up outside caught my attention. It was loud. Too loud. Isabel didn't move. She didn't react at all. But I felt a sudden tension in the air, a sharpness that made every muscle in my body tense. "Stay quiet," she said softly. "Who's out there?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. She didn't answer. She simply gestured for me to follow her to the back of the apartment, into a small hallway that led to a door I hadn't noticed before. It was locked. She pulled out a key from her pocket and unlocked it. "What's behind us?" I asked, my heart racing. She paused for a moment, eyes glinting in a way that made me feel like I wasn't ready for whatever lay ahead. "Something that's been waiting for you," she said. She pushed the door open, and I followed her into the dimly lit room beyond. I never could have imagined what I would find there. The room beyond the door was smaller than I expected, tucked away at the back of the apartment. The air in here was thick with dust and old, stale smells. The walls were bare, save for a single bookshelf against one of them, crammed with old, tattered books. The light overhead flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. There was no window, and the only sound was the quiet hum of a fan in the corner. Isabel stepped inside and walked to the bookshelf. Without saying a word, she pulled a thick, leather-bound book from one of the shelves and placed it on the table in the center of the room. Her fingers lingered on its spine for a moment before she opened it, revealing pages that looked aged and brittle. I stepped closer, my curiosity overwhelming my caution. What's this? Isabel didn't look at me. It's the beginning of your story. The part you don't remember. The words didn't make sense. My story? I don't understand. She didn't answer, but instead began flipping through the pages. They were filled with strange symbols and diagrams, things that didn't look like any language I'd ever seen before. As she turned the pages, I felt an odd sensation wash over me. A feeling of déjà vu, like I was somehow connected to everything on those pages, though I had no idea why. I wanted to ask her what the hell was going on, but something stopped me. She seemed so certain, so calm, like she was in control of the situation. And for some reason, I felt compelled to trust her. Even though every warning bell in my head was going off, telling me to leave and never look back, she stopped on a page and traced a line with her finger. The symbols there were even more intricate, almost like they were moving. I blinked, and for a brief second, the symbols seemed to shift on the page. I rubbed my eyes, but when I looked again, they were still. Do you know what this is? Isabel asked, her voice barely a whisper. I shook my head. No. What are you showing me? This is your life, she said, turning the book toward me. The events, the choices, the paths you've taken. Every step you've made has been part of something much bigger than you realize. I stared at the page, trying to make sense of the shapes and lines. This doesn't make any sense. How do you know this? How do you know me? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood up and walked over to a small cabinet against the far wall. She opened it, revealing a collection of old photographs. They were scattered on the shelves, some in frames, others not. She picked one up and handed it to me. It was a photo of me, the exact same me I saw in the mirror every day. But this wasn't any ordinary photo. There was something off about it. The edges were worn, the color faded, like it had been kept for a long time. But what really caught my attention was the date on the back. The date was from years before I was born. I felt my stomach drop. This doesn't make sense. How do you have this? Who took this picture? Isabel didn't answer. Instead, she walked over to the table, where the book was still open, and added the photo to the pages. It's all part of the plan, she said softly. You've been chosen for something bigger than yourself. This isn't a coincidence. Chosen. I repeated, my voice shaking. For what? She met my gaze, her eyes intense, as if she were trying to see straight through me. You've been living in the wrong timeline. You're here to fix it. I didn't know what to say. This was insane. I was in some stranger's apartment, staring at a book that seemed to know more about my life than I did, holding a photo of myself before I even existed. And she was talking about timelines and things that made no sense. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was telling the truth. A part of me knew it, even if I didn't understand it. The timeline? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. What do you mean? What are you talking about? She gestured toward the book. Everything you've experienced, every memory, every moment, it's all been part of a plan, and you're not the only one involved. There are others, people who are supposed to help you along the way. I felt dizzy. Others? What are you talking about? But before she could answer, a loud knock echoed through the apartment, cutting through the air like a slap. My heart stopped. Isabel's face tightened, and for the first time since I'd met her, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. Stay here, she ordered, her voice harsh. Don't move. Don't make a sound. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. The knock came again. Then, the sound of someone trying the door. Isabel's hand moved to her pocket, pulling out a small silver key. I'll be back soon. Stay hidden. She turned and moved quickly toward the back of the room, leaving me standing in stunned silence. I glanced at the book, still open to the strange symbols, my mind racing with questions that I couldn't answer. Then I heard the door creak, a low voice on the other side of the wall. Someone was definitely here. Someone was looking for us, and I had no idea what would happen next. The door creaked again, and I instinctively backed away from the table, heart pounding in my chest. Isabel had vanished through a narrow door at the back of the room, leaving me alone in the eerie silence. I wanted to follow her to ask her a million questions, but something told me I wasn't supposed to. The way she had looked at me, fearful, that was new. It felt like something was coming, something she wasn't prepared for. I stood motionless, trying to breathe normally, trying not to make a sound. But my mind was racing. What was happening? Why was Isabel so scared? The door handle rattled again, louder this time. I could hear muffled voices from outside. They were close, too close. Then, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. Not the hurried steps of someone in a panic, but the slow, methodical steps of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I could feel the air change, a pressure in the room, like something was about to happen. I glanced around, looking for an escape, but there was no way out. The only door led to where Isabel had disappeared, and the window was too high up to reach. I need to stay calm. I slowly moved toward the bookshelf, trying to make my movements as quiet as possible. The books on the shelf were dusty, untouched, except for one. The leather-bound book that Isabel had been showing me. I reached for it, my fingers trembling as I pulled it closer. The pages had the same strange symbols as before, the same diagrams. But now there was something different about them. Something was glowing faintly, barely visible in the low light. I was staring at the page when I heard the sound of the door opening. Someone was inside. I froze. A figure appeared in the doorway, casting a long shadow that stretched across the floor. At first, I couldn't make out who it was, too dark, too quick. But then the figure stepped forward, and I saw the face. It was a man, tall, with sharp features and dark, piercing eyes. His expression was cold, calculating, like he'd seen everything before, and nothing surprised him anymore. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice low and controlled, like he was used to getting answers. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't even think straight. I didn't know who this guy was or what he wanted, but something told me I wasn't supposed to answer him. He stepped inside the room fully, his eyes scanning every inch. When he saw me, he paused for a moment, his gaze lingering for just a second too long. "You," he said flatly, pointing at me. "You don't belong here." I wanted to speak, to ask him what the hell he was talking about, but my mouth was dry. I couldn't form the words. Instead, I just stood there, holding the book in my hands like it was some kind of shield. The man took another step forward, his eyes never leaving mine. "Where is Isabel?" he asked again, his voice more forceful this time. I swallowed hard. "I don't know." He studied me for a moment, as if evaluating my response. Then he took another step, closing the distance between us. I could feel the air grow colder as he approached, the weight of his presence pressing in on me. "You're lying," he said, his voice growing colder. "You don't get to play dumb. Not with me." He reached out, grabbing the book from my hands with an alarming speed. I barely had time to react before he flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the symbols with unsettling familiarity. For a moment, he was silent, his face unreadable. Then he slammed the book shut, the sound echoing through the room like a gunshot. "Where is she?" he demanded, his eyes narrowing. I took a step back, heart pounding. "I don't know." "She left." "She?" "Stop lying," he interrupted, slamming the book onto the table. He was close now, so close I could feel his breath on my face. "You think you're special. You think she's just playing some game with you? You have no idea what's going on here." My pulse raced, my mind spinning. "What's going on? Who are you?" For a brief moment, he hesitated. Then, with a heavy sigh, he spoke in a voice so low I could barely hear him. "You don't get it, do you? She's not just some girl. And neither are you." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, I heard the sound of a door opening somewhere else in the apartment. Footsteps. Rapid, urgent. Someone was coming. The man turned sharply, his expression changing in an instant from cold indifference to something more dangerous. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small, black object, a gun. He didn't point it at me, but the gesture was clear. "I don't have time for this," he said, his voice clipped. "Stay out of my way." Without waiting for a response, he turned and moved swiftly toward the door. But just as he reached the threshold, I heard Isabel's voice, her soft, calm voice, cut through the tension. "You can't stop it," she said. The man froze, his hand still on the door. Slowly, he turned around to face her. Isabel was standing in the doorway, her eyes locked on his. She didn't have the same fear I had seen before. Now, there was something else in her eyes, something darker. "You don't understand," the man said, his voice tight with frustration. "This is bigger than you, Isabel. She smiled. It wasn't the playful smile from earlier. It was cold, calculating. Dangerous. I know, she said simply. And you're about to find out why. Before he could react, she raised her hand, and in that instant, the room seemed to warp around us. The air shimmered. The walls blurred. And then, just as quickly as it had started, everything shifted. I blinked, and the man was gone. The room, too, had changed. Isabel was standing in front of me, her eyes wide, almost apologetic. You shouldn't have been here, she whispered. But now you're involved. I was still trying to make sense of what had just happened when Isabel turned to face me. Her eyes were no longer filled with that cryptic calmness I had come to expect. There was a flicker of panic in them now, real, raw panic. And for the first time, I felt completely out of my depth. You're really in it now, she said, almost to herself. Her voice was shaky, like she wasn't sure how much she could tell me without completely breaking. You shouldn't have come. This isn't your world. I opened my mouth to say something, but nothing came out. I couldn't form words. I was stuck, trapped in this room with her, trying to understand what had just happened. What she had just done. Before I could react, she grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the door at the back of the room. We don't have time, she muttered. They'll be back. They're coming for both of us. Who is? What's going on? My voice cracked. I was so overwhelmed I didn't know where to start. Everything had just exploded in a matter of minutes. I was no longer in control. I didn't even know where reality was anymore. Isabel didn't answer me. She simply yanked open the door and shoved me into a narrow hallway. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, and the flickering overhead lights made everything feel surreal, like I was walking through a nightmare. We passed several doors, some of them closed, some slightly ajar. She didn't seem to pay any attention to them, like she knew exactly where we were headed. But I was so lost in the chaos that I couldn't keep track of where we were going. Then she stopped in front of a door at the end of the hall. The door was different from the others. It was solid, wooden, reinforced with metal bolts. The kind of door you'd expect in a vault, not a regular apartment building. This is it, she said, voice low, tense. We're safe here for now. She unlocked the door and opened it, revealing a room that felt strangely familiar. It was a small, dimly lit space, almost like a study or a lab. But it wasn't the cluttered, academic kind of room you might expect. This place was organized, precise, and unsettlingly cold. Every surface was bare except for a few objects that were too perfect, too deliberate. There was a desk in the center of the room, covered with papers and blueprints, some with the same strange symbols I'd seen in the book. On the far wall, a large monitor blinked to life as we entered. Isabel didn't acknowledge it. She simply walked to the desk and grabbed a folder that was sitting there, almost like she had been expecting it. What is all this? I asked, finally finding my voice. Are these your plans? She shook her head, a hard look crossing her face. No, these are theirs. The people who are looking for us. Who are they? I asked, frustration bleeding into my tone. Why is everyone after us? Why am I even involved in this? Isabel met my gaze, and for a split second, I saw something in her eyes, something softer. Something that hinted at regret. I never wanted you to be a part of this, she said quietly. But I don't have a choice anymore. And neither do you. Why not? I demanded. What's so special about me? Why do you think I'm involved? She stared at the floor for a long moment before answering, her voice barely a whisper. You were chosen, and I didn't have the power to stop it. Not before it was too late. I blinked, processing her words. Chosen for what? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened the folder she had grabbed from the desk and spread out several sheets of paper, all covered in the same strange symbols. Some of the pages had drawings of people, of places. And as I stared at them, something started to click in my mind. I recognized some of the faces. One of them was mine. Why are you showing me this? I asked, my voice a mix of confusion and dread. What is all this? How do you know about me? Isabel didn't answer. Instead, she walked over to the monitor and pressed a button. The screen flickered to life, showing a map, an intricate network of lines and intersections, almost like a maze. At the center of the map was a red dot, a dot labeled with my name. I told you, Isabel said, her voice hardening. You're not who you think you are. You're a part of something bigger. Something much bigger than you'll ever understand. I was about to ask what she meant when the sound of footsteps outside the door sent a jolt of fear through me. Isabel's eyes went wide. They're here. I barely had time to react before the door was flung open. A group of men in dark clothing stormed into the room, their movements swift and coordinated. They didn't even look at me. Their eyes were locked on Isabel, and their faces were cold and motionless. "You've made a mistake, Isabel," one of them said, his voice flat. He didn't seem surprised to see me. He wasn't even looking at me. His focus was entirely on her. "We gave you the option. Now you're out of time." Isabel didn't flinch. She didn't even seem afraid. In fact, she stood taller, almost daring them to do something. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, her voice steady. The man stepped forward, his hand reaching inside his jacket. Isabel moved faster than I could track, pulling something from the desk and pointing it toward him. A blinding light filled the room, and I heard the unmistakable sound of electricity crackling in the air. The man screamed as the light enveloped him, but it wasn't like anything I had ever seen. It wasn't a weapon, not in the way I expected. It was as if the energy itself was alive, wrapping around him, constricting his body. He dropped to the ground with a sickening thud, unconscious. Isabel didn't look at him. She turned to me, her face completely unreadable. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice now tinged with desperation. "You need to trust me. Everything that's happening, it's about to escalate. They're coming for you next." I had no idea what to say, what to do. My head was spinning. The man on the floor wasn't the only one who'd been knocked out. I felt like I was trapped in some twisted game, and I didn't know the rules. But one thing was clear. Isabel was right. This wasn't some random event. I was caught in the middle of something I couldn't escape from, and there was only one way forward.